No Clowning Around is an episode of Power Rangers that has a ton of potential, but doesn't see it through. I think this is because there are a couple of very important carnival themed episodes in the series. This is the one I vaguely recall from as a kid, and also as an adult, my opinion is the same as what I had as a kid, in that there's a lot of really good elements in the beginning, and then the second half kind of fumbles it. I think because I'm doing this marathon style in a way, not an episode every day or anything, but enough that I'm seeing them continually. I could also kind of not help but notice that some of the fighting um, montages in morphed form were, I think, maybe even if not the exact same, but like flipped. But like a part of it where there are these stands that they're on, um, and Beppu and Squad are sort of watching. It looks very similar fighting wise. Now, when they're not morphed, when they have to do the original material, this is really interesting in that they have to utilize carnival rides in this one. Um, but I do think that them morphed, everything from them morphed onwards is actually the weakest part of this episode, which is really strange because you would think it would be opposite because it has been opposite historically a little bit. Um, it's actually like it has a really cool premise and setup. It's really easy to see why Pineapple and Pineoctopus are heavily featured in the core rulebook and the tabletop game. It's because they're very accessible. There's an element in this episode that kind of focuses on stranger danger. As a big fan of the Hell House franchise, that sort of reminds me of every Hell House movie that hasn't taken place at the Abaddon, because they all sort of have this like carnival is menace vibe. Um, this is also the first time we officially see stronger putties without them being Zed's putties. And this is something they do really well in the tabletop game is that you have three versions of putties. You get the kind of classic, very, very low ranking, not very strong putties. You get the changeling putties, which are focused here, um, which is part of what makes part of the fighting scene look very similar to the last episode we watched, Happy Birthday, Zach. And then you have Zed's early putties, which are going to get much stronger, which kind of forces the transition partially into Ninjor and the Ninjetti. In this mainline universe, in the movie universe, it's different, and that has been explained as an alternate universe Ranger thing. So don't have time for that. I will eventually talk about the film on my own because it came out in '95, so we're still in '93, so we have a couple of years. Um, I unironically, where Food Fight fails because of the camera work in a way in the introduction. No Clowning Around succeeds because the camera work is so strong. You get the idea of the sinister nature of the carnival a couple of different times, even right away in the opening. They don't waste any time. They don't want you to think Pineapple is a good guy at all, or that the workers at the carnival aren't putties. Um, Rita has conceptualized this as a trap and yet went ahead with it as like a fully working carnival. I'm kind of amused by this idea of like, I'm going to build this trap, but I'm going to do it so well that it literally is a carnival. I find that really fun. Um, I'm once again a little sad about the writing with Trini and that she's kind of a focus of the episode and she sort of is the leader in charge during the morphed portion of it when she finally comes back. But there's a portion of time where she doesn't get to fight unmorphed, which the other Rangers do. Her dialogue with her cousin Sylvia is kind of wooden. It's very formal. It's almost like they were sending each other emails. Of course, in '93, emails weren't as big a thing as they are now. Um, yeah, I love the inclusion of having Alpha teleport to help, but then having to have Alpha hide. I'm of two minds that I love the idea of it. I'm not sure if the execution is good. The idea that as a person turned into cardboard by magic dust can be reconstituted with water is a little difficult in a town that is by a bay, at least. Um, Also, Rita's plan doesn't make a ton of sense. So the idea is that Pineoctopus and Pineapple's magic dust, I think Pineoctopus also has it, is about turning people into cardboard. And yet Pineoctopus actually states, I can't affect you because of your armor. Now, this is interesting because there is a mechanic for this in the game. I think this is the thing about this is a show for kids, is that this sort of feels like when kids play at something somebody would say and it would be allowed, and it's sort of an improv type thing. Um, I don't know if it works because it makes Pineoctopus less fearsome. For about the first half of the episode, when Pineapple, before he transforms into Pineoctopus, is being like very creepy. He's beckoning Sylvia away and then beckons Billy away. Billy is really selfish in this episode in a lot of ways. It's a very strange side of Billy we don't see very much. I wonder if they wrote this with punks in mind, because Power Ranger punks, where Kimberly and Billy become punk versions of themselves, is right after this. So maybe it's a setup for that. But I feel like the last three episodes I've seen like Trini infantilized and made to sound kind of oddly formal and wooden. Um, I really want like because Trini is a character I want to know more about. Zach is a character I want to know more about, and I feel like I'm not getting that. We get a name drop from Billy having a whole bunch of like stuff in his garage. And it's just assumed that's okay. This goes back to my I guy theory about how the kids are super geniuses, and then as they get older, they get a little less smart, but it's still like a super genius town or something, I guess. Um, yeah, No Clowning Around has a lot of potential. I actually really love the fight scenes. I can't remember this episode and why Bo isn't more involved. I think Bo's the Yellow Ranger in the Sentai, and why Bo isn't more involved. And it could just be that's the amount of footage they had to deal with. I don't like that it feels like the same footage from Happy Birthday Zach in some places. That is a little rough. Um, because putties have like a sort of distinct style, so when that style changes even slightly, I can sort of tell personally. Um, yeah, Pineoctopus also has the potential to be a really strong villain in both these forms, and the fact that we're never going to see him again, the fact that he's so easily defeated once he's no longer the clown. Um, it's nice to see the Megazord use its kind of helmet laser earth shaking thing that it does. But the escalation doesn't feel warranted. Like once they have Pineoctopus frozen and wrapped in chains, then they just Megazord up and they shoot. But before that, in the first half of the episode, Pineapple the clown feels very prescient, feels very ominous, feels very in control. This is, I think, probably the first Rita monster where it feels like he comes from somewhere else or is just like an ally of Rita that just like was hanging out on Mars and was like, "Hey Rita, what you up to?" And it's like, "Oh, great, I'll go attack some teenagers." He it's almost like you don't need Rita in this episode for it to work. And that bothers me a little bit because she is the main villain of at least this season. Um, I'm gonna miss when they switch Ritas because I really like season one Rita. I think later Rita, who reads a little younger, is not not my favorite Rita. Um, yeah. So no clowning around. I mean, it's very 90s. It's very stranger danger. That seems to be the hot button moral implication of the episode. Um, it's not bad. It's easy to see why Pineapple got their own place in the tabletop game. Um, but it's hard to have a villain that starts out so strong that ends so weakly. It doesn't really like. I feel like once they got to the Morphin part, they just wanted the Sentai version to do its job, but there was a whole bunch of stuff they kind of left lagging. Magic Dust is a really great idea too. Uh, good to have it in. You wouldn't want it in the wrong evil hands of someone that was actually good at using it, because the plan sort of falls apart almost immediately. Um, I do like the idea that Billy is smart enough to look for reflections. So like he knows before he gets attacked, so he actually sees another putty turned into a cardboard cutout. I do question why Billy wasn't sent with Trini. I guess the idea of like they knew they weren't going to fight Morphed quite yet in case there were people left over. It's also really interesting. There is a plot point here specifically where no one bats an eye when Jason grabs a megaphone and yells at people that it's a trap and Reed is going to attack or is attacking, and everyone just runs for the hills. This is, I think, the first time where I feel like I've seen sort of the PTSD side of Angel Grove, that like constant doom presence thing. Um, it's an interesting thing. I really wanted to like No Cloning Ground. I think it's very iconic. I'm really hoping Power Ranger Punks doesn't disappoint as much as this is disappointed. What's interesting though is that I keep thinking when I saw this as a kid, I felt the same way as I do now. Is that the first half of the episode is so strong, and the second half really just kind of loses it. It's like you can almost tell where they're like, oh, we have Sentai footage, let that take it, and we'll just do some dubbing. Um, the setup is really good though. Bulk and Skull actually feel appropriate to this. Again, Billy does some stuff that reads weird and selfish. I like the idea of Zach practicing on stilts. I feel like I'm getting a lot of Zach now because I'm like hyper focused on looking for it. And the idea of being adventurous and sporty is really there, more so than I see the dance aspect. It's not bad at all. I really wish they weren't doing this thing where like it's very weird because it's writing of Trini where she's becoming this very like in the past couple episodes especially she's become this very kind of formal character, and it doesn't sound like naturally a teen speaking the lines. None of them really sound Californian so much, not even Kimberly. And so like I have to keep telling myself this was supposedly set in California because it that's where it's set in the tabletop game especially. Um, I don't know. Yeah. Clowning Around is not the worst episode of season one. It's not even the worst episode of the batch of 10. But it's sort of like a remembrance to continually to scale up your villain if the heroes can scale up. Because I think Pineoctopus has Pineoctopus in the book has a lot of health and can do a lot. There's a whole journey you go on in the core book when you do the Pineoctopus Pineapple Adventure. That feels a lot more thrilling and grappling and like something you have to solve as a group than this did. There were some really good they're very 90s. So they're kind of an outdated technique now, but they're very 90s techniques I like to celebrate, where they're very comfortable now with cameras and doing montage, the way they focus the carnival, the way they're very upfront as to who the villain is. They don't want you to guess at all. I don't think it's bad, and I think the pacing is appropriate, oddly enough. So it kind of hurts me internally to actually put this episode as low ranking as it is. Because uh, it ends up at number 7, so it's not even gonna get into one of the top 5 lists. Um, but it's not by far not the worst episode at all. It really does feel like they're hitting their stride. The problem with the stride is that the stride in the early 90s, minority characters didn't get enough to do, and just like I feel like I've seen episodes focused on Trini, but it's not enough to like feel like I know Trini as well as the other Rangers, which is weird to say because I know them about the same, but it sort of feels like they don't know how to write the characters of color as much as they know how to write. Like I feel like I know more about Billy than I do about any of them. And like the stuff Billy is doing is not necessarily stuff I think is necessarily okay. I'm curious to see if the selfishness in Billy from this episode comes back at all, or if this is just like a one-off where this is what they wanted him to do. I'm curious. So I'm going to keep an eyeball on it, and I'm trying not to editorialize. Obviously, these are my recaps and rankings and personal thoughts, but I kind of want to look at it through the sense of an overall scope of narrative, knowing what I know about Billy, and trying to see like where is that foreshadowing at? Do we get it before season 3? Um, it's a curious thing because I know what's going to happen, like nominally, but like I want to be able to see and kind of deconstruct the building blocks, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes I have less success than other times. Um, yeah, so that was no clowning around. which is a fairly well-known episode. It's why it's part of the tabletop game core rulebook, the verse one. And then there's one with Oscar the Ostrich, I think, is part of it's another carnival one, which is like a secondary adventure you can buy. The next episode is going to be Power Ranger Punk, which I'm interested to see because in the early 90s, Punk wasn't. I remember when SLC Punk was done, but Punk was still very underground. So I'm curious to see what the Power Ranger brand does with Punk in this iteration. I remember really liking Power Ranger Punks and really thinking it was a really cool like device and a really cool like figure it out sort of thing. Um, so we'll see. But no clowning around didn't end up very high on the list, which makes me a little sad. Um, I kind of wish Pineoctopus hadn't been destroyed because I would have liked to have seen Pineapple the Clown come back every now and then. Uh, I think it's a pretty, I think it's a pretty potentially iconic villain. Um, where in its not transformed form, it's actually better. It's also one of the few villains that we hear speak to the Rangers that can apparently hear them when they talk to each other, um, even in their helmets. So yeah, there's no clowning around. I did not clown around while I was watching it, and I feel like I saw a lot about kind of this version of the series before Tommy, because we're actually getting pretty close at this point. Because this is episode 11, we're only 6 episodes away from Green with Evil. So I kind of wish I lived in the world like where they'd had a whole season and then Tommy had been the start of season two. Because I'm wondering if some of this is them having all this footage, not knowing quite what to do with it, and then also like, because I know it's a series that was made in the 90s and it was made for my age group for when I was much, much younger. So part of it is that, but like, there's so much potential in the show. It's why I keep coming back to it, you know? Um, and it is fun. But from a narrative standpoint, I'm really trying to find something narratively to hang my hat on that I feel like they're reaching for that they haven't quite gotten to yet. Um, and I'm interested to see where it goes. So I'll see you next time for Power Ranger Punks. And as Zordon says, even though he wasn't in this episode, may the power protect you.